Hello, my name is Caleb Wharton, and today I'm going to be presenting my level, Minotaur's Might. I'll start by giving you a little bit of a background on the level. In 1900 BC, Knossos Palace was constructed for a Minoan king. Below the place was a labyrinth where Minotaurs lived. Players play as a guard who is watching the north entrance of the palace when the earth begins to shake. Minotaurs begin taking over the palace and roaming the halls, while the boss Minotaur watches over the courtyard to make sure no intruders get to the king. With the king trapped in the throne room and the halls of the place riddled with Minotaurs, it's the player's job to get to the king and escort him to safety. Minotaur's Might can be described as a third-person action-adventure stealth game that showcases puzzles. Players will start at the north entrance of the palace and take the king to the west entrance of the palace. The main objective is to find and get the king and escort him to safety at that west entrance. Players will also have optional objectives to save a cat on the eastmost path, collect relics around the map, and to activate relic abilities. The relic abilities can be activated at various puzzle spots. One puzzle being an axe puzzle where players will rotate axes, and one puzzle being a lamp puzzle where players have to light up lamps in a sequence. Both of these puzzles will allow players to unlock one of the abilities, either haste or shadow. During the first week of planning, I was tasked to make 3 different maps to show how the level would flow. The first map that I'll be going over is the bubble diagram. The bubble diagram shows a basic flow of the level with the basics of what will be in that area. The first path that we can look at is the westmost path. This path will go from the north entrance down through the hall, through the basin room, where the player will take a hallway down to the throne room, and all of the paths connect at the throne room and lead the player through a stairwell to the west entrance where they'll escape. The central path takes players straight through the hallway, through the courtyard, and to the throne room. This can be more of a linear path, but also offers more difficulty since the players have to evade a few more Minotaurs and the hulking boss Minotaur in the courtyard. Finally, the final path offers more exploration on the east side. Players will go from the north entrance to a storeroom, where they can choose to go into the bull fresco room, or into the war room. Upon finishing on the east side, players will go through the courtyard to the throne room and help the king exit at the west entrance. Next, we'll look over the top-down map that I made. This top-down map shows essentially the basic paths and shapes and sizes of each room. As you can see, going over through the map here, I have laid out some objectives and icons that the player can look at to see how the design is built. Various red dots around the map will be the patrolling Minotaurs, or the middle red dot there you can see in the courtyard is the boss Minotaur. Various blue backed icons like the activation powers for the relics, saving the cat, exploding the wall are all going to be your optional objectives. The yellow icons will have the relics at them, and the green icon is where the player will go and find the king. As you can see there, right by the throne room is where the king icon is. And next I'll show you the top-down map with all the objectives and the paths. This top-down map can be a little bit more comprehensive since it shows more of the pathways that the player can take, as well as what each room contains. It showcases what each path will contain, having the first path, which we'll call the west path, having 3 relics, 3 patrolling Minotaurs, and 1 relic activation. The second path, which would be the central path, has 2 relics, 1 destructible wall, 1 patrolling Minotaur, 1 boss Minotaur, and 1 relic activation. We could actually consider this to have 2 relic activations since the player can insist to go down the courtyard and grab this relic at the very southmost point of the courtyard. Finally, the third path the player can take has a majority of the stuff. It's meant to allow the player to explore. It will have that one save a cat objective, 5 patrolling Minotaurs, 1 boss Minotaur, since they have to cross through the courtyard, 2 activation relics, or 2 relic activation abilities, since they can go to the war room and get that, and to the throne room, and they'll have 5 destructible walls. Now, the destructible walls were cut out in the second week of block mesh development, but they're intended to be brought back, and I'll explain that later. Now we're going to go through the block mesh development of my level. First off, I decided to use the map and lay out all of the rooms for the first level, and then for the second level, I just decided to try to use basic stairs to build staircases that led up to this second level, and essentially just use the map as well to mark off and block off each room. After blocking off each room, I decided to use placeholders such as the Minotaur's static mesh to put around the map to show where the player would have to avoid Minotaurs, where they could get abilities, where they could collect relics, so on and so forth. Throughout the block mesh photos that I'm going to be showing you, you can see that there are various areas where you can see blocks on the floor. That's because I added the destructible wall mechanism, but the destructible walls later on became more of a disadvantage to me than they were an advantage to this project, and I'll explain that later. I'll now go over all the findings that I acquired over the first week of playtesting. For the playtest, I acquired 5 unique players who hadn't played the level before, and I briefly explained to them the level story and basic character movements. Each player was offered to play the level 1 time at minimum, with a maximum of 2 times to check the replayability of the level. One finding that I found was that if players spent over 5 minutes to complete the level, they usually got between 4 plus relics, whereas players that spent under 5 minutes were either more prone to failing the level, or they would only get 3 or less relics. Another noticeable finding that I found was that players that passed the level passed with 50% completion or higher, whereas players that failed the level failed with a 40% completion or lower. I also decided to check the replayability of the level. Out of the 5 players, 3 of them played the level for a second time. What I found was that the first go-around, the first attempt, 33% of the players passed the level, whereas 66% of the players failed the level. Meanwhile, for the second attempt, 100% of the players passed the level, with a minimum of 60% completion and a maximum of 80% completion, almost doubling the average completion percentage from the first attempt. Finally, the last data point that I wanted to check was how players were interacting with the abilities. Coming into this test, I thought that the players would utilize the abilities and the puzzles more frequently. What I came to find was that 3 of the 5 players that tested it, meaning 60%, did not even unlock an ability. This ended up raising a red flag for me, and I came to realize that in the future, the abilities unlock or the activation statues need to be moved to a more focal point for the players, as well as having more player feedback to draw in and entice the players to actually activate these locked puzzles. Now that we've gone over the base of the level and some of the findings, I'm going to go ahead and do a playthrough here. So going through here, we can see we pick up some of these relics. There are a few branching paths here. I'm going to take you down the eastmost path just since it has the most explorative explorative path. Players will be able to go to that NPC and he'll give them a mission to go collect a cat. And as you can see here, we grab the cat up top, and then we're just going to jump down and go turn it back into him. Some of the findings that I found in the playtest was that players were a little bit upset that they didn't get any rewards for that, so in the future I'll probably be adding some rewards. As you can see, running through these various doorways, these various openings, originally those had destructible walls. Those needed to be taken out after the first week of block mesh development. I was saying that I would explain it to you guys. So the main reason for it was I had all of these other random abilities that I was adding into my level, and the walls just weren't destroying right. I had to add in a throwable with a projectile path to make it accurate. While I have the projectile with projectile path and the destructible meshes were all set up, it was more so a hassle of optimizing it to make it so that it wouldn't destroy essentially the frames per second for the players, which it was currently at the time, so I saved it for a later date where I could more optimize it. Going in here, players can take this little path around in the courtyard, dodging, and grab this other relic as we were shown in that top-down map. Coming in here. Going in, this is another way past the courtyard into the throne room, and we see another activation statue. This activation statue is actually the light puzzle, whereas the other one was the axe puzzle, and we saw that we gained the shadow ability. This time we're going to unlock the haste ability, and I'll go ahead and use that to get over to the king here, so we can start getting him out. Alright. Activate that and run on over here, and as you can see, I made it to 50% speed boost, which it could definitely be lowered. Going through here, we also have the stop and go ability, telling the player to stop and follow. This shadow ability makes it so that the players aren't able, makes it so that the AIs aren't able to detect the player. It essentially shrouds them in what I call a shadow. So going back here, we whistle for the player or the king to follow us, and we're kind of waiting here. He did get stuck on the Minotaur. That is something that will need fixed later on in development. Dodging here, and that king is able to follow us as we go up the stairs towards the west exit. Once we hit the west exit, we'll see that we have a end screen here that shows us all of our data. There it is. And that's it for the gameplay. I hope that you guys enjoyed the level. I appreciate you all for watching, and have a good day. Thank you.